and then take 20% of that and mail your check in. I mean, even Timothy Geithner can get his taxes in on time with that type of a system. And that is where we need to be focused, is creating jobs, is pulling back those regulations that we talk about since '08 that this administration have pushed into place that have strangled jobs. Getting America back working. That's what I've done for 11 years as the governor of the 13th largest economy in the world. 1 million jobs have been created in that state. And our housing market not only is pretty solid, it's growing, and it's doing because we have created that climate where job creators know that they can go out and risk their capital and have a return on the investment. As the President of the United States, that's what I'm going to do, is to walk into Washington, D.C., work towards a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution, and try to pass a constitutional amendment, if the people will accept and work with me, to make Congress a part-time body. So they stay less time in Washington, D.C., they go back home and get a real job like everybody else has, and live under the laws that they pass.
So beyond moving to a part-time Congress and encouraging the rest of the nation to follow Texas in terms of job creation, you would take no pointed measures aimed at helping the U.S. housing market?
I think I said two things that are pretty powerful. Cut the taxes and cut the regulations, which will increase the jobs, and people will have the income to come in. I don't think it is the government's responsibility. Look, we've already seen that with Freddie and Fannie. We don't need the federal government in the housing market anymore. They need to be out of the housing market.
Jerry Schaaf.
Governor Romney, in the book you wrote just before this campaign began, you said you were surprised that the press in the last campaign didn't press for more specifics on how to fix Social Security and Medicare. So let's fix that tonight. Let me ask you specifically, would you reduce the cost of these programs by raising the retirement age for Social Security, by raising the eligibility age for Medicare, or by reducing benefits for seniors with higher incomes?
Let me lay it out. First of all, for the people who are already retired or 55 years of age and older, nothing changes. It's very important because I know the Democrats are going to be showing videos of old people being thrown off cliffs and so forth. But don't forget who it was that cut Medicare by $500 billion, and that was President Obama to pay for Obamacare. So let's not forget that. What I would do with Social Security is that I would lower, if you will, the 2.0, the version for the next generations coming up. I'd lower the rate of inflation growth in the benefits received by higher income recipients and keep the rate as it is now pretty high for lower income recipients. And I'd also add a year to two to the retirement age under Social Security. That balances Social Security. With regards to Medicare, I would lay out the plan that, I actually did a couple of months ago that said, again, for higher income recipients, lower benefit, a premium support program which allows people to buy either current standard Medicare or a private plan. And this is the proposal which Congressman Paul Ryan has adopted. It's a proposal which I believe is absolutely right on. We have a premium support program, give people choice, let competition exist in our Medicare program by virtue of the two things I've described. Higher benefits for lower income people, lower benefits for higher income people, and making a premium support program in Medicare and Social Security a slightly higher retirement age. You balance those two programs. By the way, the third major entitlement, Medicaid, you send back to the states. And the fourth new entitlement, Obamacare, you repeal that one. And finally get our balance sheet right.
Speaker Gingrich.
Speaker Gingrich, in the plan that you've endorsed for addressing Social Security, you suggest also that younger workers should be allowed to put their tax money into private accounts rather than into the government program. But that plan also says that if those private accounts don't pay out as much as the government program would, Washington should cut a check to make up the difference. Is that really a free market outcome if the government guarantees the outcome?
Well, it is, as a historian, a fact-based model that has Galveston, Texas, and the entire country of Chile as testing grounds. Chile has done this. Jose Piñera is glad to talk about it, the guy who created it. They've done it for over 30 years. First of all, it's totally voluntary. If you want to stay in the current system, stay in it. If you're younger and you want to go and take a personal savings account, which would be a Social Security savings account, you can take it. Your share of the tax goes into that. The employer's share goes into the regular fund to pay for the regular fund. The historic record in Chile is the average young person gets 2 to 3 times the retirement income In 30 years, they've never written a single check because nobody has fallen below the minimum payment of Social Security. Now, these are just historic facts. They now have 74% of the GDP in their savings fund, so much that they now allow people to actually invest outside the country. The Principal Group in Des Moines, Iowa actually runs part of this program, and I actually interviewed the person who was in charge of it for the Principal Group. So the Social Security actuary estimated if you make it a voluntary program, 95 to 97% of young people will take the program because it is such a big return on your investment, you'd be relatively stupid not to do it. Okay, now, what does it do? It gets the government out of telling you when to retire. It gets the government out of picking winners and losers. It makes every American an investor when they first go to work. They all have a buildup of an estate, which you do not get in the current system. And the estimate by Martin Feldstein at Harvard who was Reagan's chief counsel and economic advisors, was you actually reduce wealth inequality in America by 50% over the next generation because everybody becomes a saver and investor, and you have a universal investing nation.
Senator Santorum. Senator Santorum, in your jobs program, you propose to eliminate the corporate income tax for manufacturers, but not for other businesses. Isn't that picking winners and losers in the same way the Obama administration did when it gave grants to one solar energy company, Solyndra, and it went bankrupt?
No, it's not. What we do is cut corporate taxes for everybody, cut it from 35% to 17.5%, make it basically a net profits tax. And then we take the area of the economy that is under competition from overseas for our jobs. The rest of the economy is not being shipped off like the mills here in South Carolina were to other countries around the world because of foreign competition. Why? The foreign competition that we're dealing with right now is much cheaper to do business, excluding labor costs, than we are, about 20% more, and that 20% differential is government. It's government regulations, and it's also government taxation. So part of what we're trying to do is to have a government system that can compete with who our competitor is. The competitor at the local drugstore is not China. The competitor is other people, and as long as that is level and everybody's paying, the big corporations and the little ones, and that's why we have a flat 17.5%. So we keep the little guys paying the same rate as the big guys who have, right now with this very complex code, a lot of folks in there trying to reduce rates by using the tax code to shrink their tax liability. So we've leveled the playing field for the guys here in this country, and we've created a competitive environment for the manufacturer. I want to make a point about Newt and Mitt's plans, because they're not bold, and they're not in the case of Governor Romney, and they're irresponsible. And I say that against Newt because there's nobody for the last 15 years has been more in favor of personal savings accounts than I have for Social Security. But we were doing that when we had a surplus in Social Security. We're now running a deficit in Social Security. We're now running a huge deficit in this country. Under Congressman Gingrich's proposals, if he's right that 95% of younger workers take it, there'll be hundreds of billions of dollars in increased debt. Hundreds of billions of dollars of more debt being put on the books, which we can't simply, if we're going to be borrowing money from China to fund these accounts, which is wrong. I'm for those accounts, but first, we have to get our fiscal house in order, balance this budget, and then create the opportunity that Newt wants. But the idea of doing that now is fiscal insanity.
Speaker
and
Gingrich.
Mitt Romney's plan is simply not bold. We have a deficit now in Social Security. We have deficits now in Medicare. And he wants to say, well, we're not going to touch anybody now. There are 60,000 people in this country who are earning over $1 million a year as a senior. And he's saying, no, let's not touch them. I'm saying, yes, we should absolutely do something about people who don't need Social Security when we're borrowing money from China to pay those millionaires.
Okay, first Speaker Gingrich, your response.
Well, if you actually look at the plan at newt.org, you'll see that one of the ways we pay for it is we take 185 different federal bureaucracies that deal with low-income Americans. Think about this. There are 185 separate bureaucracies with separate regulations, all dealing with low-income Americans. We consolidate them into a single block grant. We send it back to the states, and we take the billions of dollars in federal overhead that saves and put that into Social Security in order to make up the difference. So, in fact, Rick, it is a very sound plan, and I say this as somebody who helped balance the budget 4 times in a row.
Quickly.
Newt, I support that idea, But we need that to reduce the deficit we have now, not doing what you're suggesting, which is ballooning the deficit by hundreds of billions of dollars more, and then using things that we should be doing now to shrink this budget deficit to add more fiscal financial responsibility onto the federal government.
Last one.
Sure. Okay. Martin Feldstein estimates that if you have a personal savings account model, you increase the size of the GDP of the economy by $7 to $8 trillion over a generation because of the massive reinvestment. In addition, I would just suggest, having helped balance the budget for 4 consecutive years for the only time in your lifetime, I'm reasonably confident I can find ways to balance the budget without hurting young people and blocking them from Social Security.
Governor Romney, do you want your 30 seconds? Or are you just enjoying this back and forth? Would you like to weigh in?
Rick is right. I know it's popular here to say, oh, we can do this and it's not going to cost anything. But look, it's going to get tough to get our federal spending from the current 25% of the GDP down to 20, down to 18%, which has been our history. We got a huge number of obligations in this country, and cutting back is going to have to happen. I know something about balancing budgets. In the private sector, you don't have a choice. You balance your budget or you go out of business. And we simply can't say we're going to go out and borrow more money to let people set up new accounts that take money away from Social Security and Medicare today. Therefore, we should allow people to have a voluntary account, a voluntary savings program, tax-free. That's why I've said anybody middle income should be able to save their money tax-free. No tax on interest, dividends, or capital gains. That'll get Americans saving. It accomplishes your objective, Mr. Speaker, without threatening the future of America's vitality by virtue of fiscal insanity.
Coming up, social issues, and a reminder, go to foxnews.com/debate to see how well the candidates are answering the questions with your votes. Keep it here. Welcome back to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Now for the next round of questions, my colleague Juan Williams.
Governor Romney, Speaker Gingrich says your record of support for gun owners is weak. You signed the nation's first ban on assault weapons in Massachusetts and steeply increased fees on gun owners in that state, in fact, by 400%. How can you convince gun owners that you will be an advocate for them as president?
Well, Juan, in my state, we had a piece of legislation that was crafted both by the pro-gun lobby and the anti-gun lobby. Massachusetts had some very restrictive rules, and the pro-gun lobby said, you know what, this legislation is good for us. It includes provisions that we want, that allows us, for instance, to cross roads with weapons when we're hunting that had not been previously allowed. And so the pro-gun folks in our state, the Gun Owners Action League and others said, look, we'd like you to sign this legislation. And at the day when we announced our signing, we had both the pro-gun and the anti-gun folks all together on the stage because it worked together. We found common ground. My view is that we have the Second Amendment right to bear arms. And in this country, my view is also that we should not add new legislation. I know that there are people who think that we need new laws. We need to find new ways to restrict gun ownership. And there is in Washington a nonstop effort on the part of some legislators, and I believe the president, to restrict the right of law-abiding American citizens from owning a gun. I disagree with that. I believe we have in place all the laws we need. We should enforce those laws. I do not believe in new laws restricting gun ownership and gun use.
By the way, Governor, I remember that you were teased mightily a few years ago for saying you hunted varmints. I just wonder if you've gone hunting since '07. I'm not going to describe all of my great exploits, but I went moose hunting, actually, not moose hunting, I'm sorry, elk hunting with friends in Montana, been pheasant hunting. I'm not the great hunter that some on this stage probably do. Rick Perry, my guess is you're a serious hunter. I'm not a serious hunter,
right.
but I must admit I guess I enjoy the sport, and when I get invited, I'm delighted to be able to go hunting.
Senator Santorum, you voted in support of requiring trigger locks on handguns. You also voted for background checks on firearm purchases made at gun shows. These positions have led your rivals to question your Second Amendment bona fides. What can you say tonight to reassure gun owners that you will stand with them?
Both of those things were supported by the National Rifle Association. I worked with them to craft a bill. This was during the Clinton administration.